think?
Well, to AB's point, I think the public surprise at this is that Paul Manafort has had this public face of defiance, right? I will fight the charges. I'm not interested in a deal. But the reality is, as these trials progress and you start to see the weight of the evidence against you, and you see the juries kind of nodding their heads at the prosecution's story that they're telling about you, and you're getting closer and closer to that final day of judgment, people's minds can easily change. And having, to Shimon's point, another trial around the corner in a probably even more hostile venue with even more dramatic charges against him, I have to think that a plea has to be on Mr. Manafort's mind. And if negotiations have broken down, it would not shock me a minute if they are restarted at some point.
Would you be surprised, Joseph, if they move the trial outside of the District of Columbia?
That's a fairly extreme measure. I can see why Mr. Manafort's defense team would make the argument. He'll say, I can't get a fair hearing in D.C. because the president has single-digit popularity in this jurisdiction. But that's an extremely difficult decision to get from a judge. More likely, they'll have a vigorous voir dire. They will vet the jurors. They will ask them, as they did in Virginia a few months ago, can you view the evidence fairly and make a fair decision? And the criminal justice system will work as it's supposed to.
Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, AB, told Ardana Bash yesterday that it's been about 3 weeks since they responded in a letter to Mueller's team about the possibility of the president actually sitting down for an interview. They haven't heard anything back since then. Does anybody really think there's going to be an interview? Because the various options are a subpoena to testify before a grand jury, if that's what the Mueller team wants to do.
Right. I heard Alan Dershowitz on your air this morning basically saying that the Trump team made an offer that Mueller couldn't accept, and they'll always argue that it was an offer, but all along they've known that the president was not going to sit down for an interview. Are they waiting for a subpoena? We don't think, if the study we've made of Bob Mueller is that he's really a by-the-book guy. And after James Comey's intervention 11 days before the 2016 election, it's not likely for him to get into a huge subpoena battle late into the month of September with the president and his legal team. There's also a ruse afoot perpetrated by Rudy Giuliani and other Trump allies that Bob Mueller is going to finish the entire investigation by this weekend, which is not true. It's going to go on and on and on. Is he going to intervene with the midterm elections? That's not likely. But we're looking probably at a long pause, but also an investigation that's likely to carry on much longer than the president's team is willing to admit.
And if there's a subpoena to the president to testify before a grand jury, that could drag through the courts for a long time.
It can and it will. I mean, ultimately, my view, and I think the view of most of us in the field, is that a president would ultimately have to submit to a subpoena or else plead the fifth. But you're right, it will take months to weave its way through the courts, possibly even getting to the Supreme Court to make a final decision.
How is this playing out politically right now, AB? Because we are only, what 70 days or so from the midterm elections. Is it likely? There's no way it's going to be wrapped up before then. It's going to go on. But the question is, does Mueller, for political reasons, because there is a tradition of the Department of Justice, you don't make these kinds of announcements, major statements in advance of an election by those who are part of the election. I guess the president is part of the election, even though he personally isn't running. There is a tradition you avoid that.
I just think it's going to be dark from now through well after November 6th. And I think this idea that you can see conservatives on Twitter saying, Special Counsel Mueller, it's time to get everything wrapped up by the weekend. Like he's going to have a report to Congress. We're looking at a long road. It could go well into 2019. But yes, is it going to affect the midterms? It is, because there's new news out of Southern District of New York and new legal peril for the president that's going to be part of the Democrats' narrative.
Let's not forget the Iran-Contra investigation went on for 7 years. The Whitewater investigation during the Bill Clinton administration, that went on for 6 or 7 years, too. This has been going on for just more than a year so far. Guys, thank you very, very much. Up next, a new push